So I actually got fired from a listing the other day, and here's the backstory. One of our agents in one of our markets and I were working on listing this house. We had met the people, we had walked through the property, we had a good time going. Everything was adding up, we got the paperwork done, but here's the catch. They wanted to change the price. So for reference sake, we did a comparable sales analysis and realized that this house would probably sell somewhere between $420,000 and $440,000. That was our range. And what I like to do is give sellers a range and they pick between there. If they don't like our range, that is totally fine too. I'm not here to force people into selling their house, but I like to be able to sell houses, not just list them. So what I like to do when it comes to comparables, and I've done other videos on this, the top of the range is probably the nicest house that's comparable to them that have sold in the recent past that they could probably sell for too. And the bottom of the range is another comparable house that is not as nice as theirs probably, and that has sold for the least amount of money. And then somewhere in between is where our house will fall. It may be the nicest house and we know that number, or it may be a mediocre house and we know that number too. But what it does is it gives sellers the option to improve their house, to do renovations, to do updates that may allow them to get more money for their house if they're willing to invest that amount of money. So for instance, hey, the top house went for $500,000. I think yours is in the middle of the range at $450,000, but it was made of gold and granite, right? That's one I always use. Well, do you want to spend $100,000 to have the same fits and finishes as that one and maybe only make $50,000 more? Probably not. So what I like to do is give them that range, and oftentimes we meet somewhere in the middle. So for this client in particular, we did a listing appointment, we walked through the house, we made our recommendations, and like I said, we came back with a price range of $420,000 to $440,000. We went to do paperwork, and guess what? They wanted to do $500,000. I was like, oh, well, tell me more. How did you get to the $500,000 mark? Where did you come up with that number? And they said, well, based on the houses that have sold in their neighborhood, they feel that their math is more accurate. So again, we pull out the comps, and what we realized was, yes, the houses in their neighborhood have sold closer to 500, but they were also 200 to 400 square feet larger. And so that's where we're seeing a lot of the discrepancy. So we went through it again, redid the math, and I even told him, I was like, listen, I will resharpen my pencil, I will go back and do comps again, and I will see what we can do. I looked at it, I realized that, still 440 or 445, I can't remember the number, was more of an accurate number. And so I kind of held my ground. I said, Mr. Seller, I understand that you want more money. I want you to have more money, but statistically, I don't think we can get it. And not only that, but I don't think an appraiser can appraise your house for more because the other comparables in the market aren't going to lend itself to doing that. And that was a big kicker because oftentimes we forget that we have a math checker coming behind us to make sure the houses that we're listing are worth the amount we're selling for. It would have been very easy for me and the agent I'm working with to say, yeah, 500, sure, let's put it on the market. Let's see what happens. But what are we really doing? We're giving a disservice. We're not actually helping our sellers, and we've just committed to a price that we know we can't sell. So when it does sell for a lower price, which statistically it will, they're gonna be mad at us. It's gonna look like we failed, and they're gonna tell their friends and family like, hey, we thought they were a good company, but at the end of the day, like they didn't sell it for the price they said they could. So after sharpening my pencil, going back to the seller, we kind of settled on a new number. And the reason was, I was like, listen, I think your house probably is worth the 440, the higher end. Let's kick it up to 450. That way we hit a good search criteria. So I don't know if you're like me, but I like to have whole hard numbers, 450, 425, 475, 500. I don't do the dollar store stuff. Not gonna do 449. So at 450, people that are looking online typically do the drop downs and they're looking from 400 to 450, and there's people looking from 450 to 500, which we hit both markets. And I think that's a phenomenal strategy when it comes to marketing. He understood, he agreed with us, we redid paperwork, we sent it over, and then we get a pause. I get an email in the middle of the night and he says, hey Brad, I appreciate the math, but Zillow says my house is worth this. Realtor.com says my house is worth this. So we think our house is still worth at least $485,000. Now y'all, this is the third time I've done comps on the same damn house in a week. They didn't change. But I also understand that I am not God's gift to pricing. Like I am not 100% on everything, and you never know if there's gonna be a buyer that does that. And that was their theory. Hey, we want to list it higher so we can negotiate down. Fair assessment. But guess what? What if we never get a buyer to negotiate with? In my opinion, we have to price the house for what the majority of the market will see as a reasonable price. And if there are multiple people that see that price as reasonable, then they can bid it up to whatever price they're willing to pay. But I don't feel like I should price it where they could go and hopefully we get it. I need to price it to where it is and let them take it to where they want to pay for it, if that makes sense. The other thing is he said, hey, our market's really strong. I think we have a good shot at doing this. I agree, the market does look good, but also inventory is up and buyer demand is down. So therefore, we don't know if the market's good. It's only February. It might not be good. It may not become good. So we have to, again, price it with the knowledge that we have, not with the knowledge we want. So we have to price on the numbers that we have in front of us. So all that to be said, I give them this long epitaph of stuff and tell them, back it up and say, hey, even Zillow said your house is worth $440. And I pulled 3 other pricing mechanisms that we have access to. And all 3 automatic value pricing mechanisms said it was between $440, $450, and one even said $1 million. That was crazy. So that was just to prove that sometimes these valuation systems are so far off. Not having a crystal ball, I went back and I said, listen, I don't always have a crystal ball and I don't want to leave money on the table. And I do have an internal rule that if I come to a stalemate with a seller over a price, I give them 2 options before I decline to take the listing. One is I will go 3% over my highest. And you might be like, oh, Brad, you're giving in to pricing now. I don't think so. What I'm saying is I don't know if I'm 100% correct. And I have this internal mechanism where I'll give a little bit of buffer. And I tell them I will go up 3%, so that took their house to $463,000. But with the understanding that if we're not under contract in the first 30 days, they agreed to reduce to the high number of $450. Or I'm willing to get an appraisal done on the house at their cost. Now, I don't think appraisals really are good for this, but sometimes it's good to have a second opinion, especially that of a professional, come in and tell us the price. So I offered those 2. They said, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. I think 463 is gonna work. You know what happened next? They called back and they said, hey, we just don't think you're gonna fight for us. We think that you're only looking out for the buyer, so we actually don't wanna list our house with you. Totally understand it. And guess what? I was relieved because guys, I really thought the price was gonna be about $440. I've already moved over my highest amount, but I also knew that most likely I couldn't sell it. And not only was I afraid I couldn't sell it, but I was afraid about the amount of time, the energy, and the money I was gonna spend on a listing that I actually couldn't sell. I don't like to gamble with pricing. I like to use actual data to price houses. So this is the one time that I got fired from a listing and I didn't really mind because I think they're doing me a favor. Now, what am I doing now? I'm gonna be watching that listing. I'm gonna be seeing if they actually get the price they said. I may have to eat crow on this one, but at least I know I won't be losing money on it. All right, so I just shared with you how I got fired one time. I'd love to know a way that you got let go of a listing, or maybe you didn't take one because you couldn't see eye to eye with the seller. Drop that in the comments below. I'd love to start a conversation about it. And as always, if I can be a resource for you or a referral source for you, I'd love to do so. Just shoot me a DM and let's connect.